Getting a new salesperson up to speed, making them competent and independent in order to become successful as a salesperson in the field, incredibly difficult. No matter how you look at it, it takes a long time to give people that confidence that they have the knowledge and the ability and the expertise to go out and be successful in the field. Well, in this week's Sales Untraining episode, I talked to Brandon White, the VP of Sales and Marketing at Multivac. And we talk about the difficulty in getting salespeople up to speed. This is someone who started as a sales administrator at the company, and 22 years later is now the VP of Sales and Marketing. A very interesting and unique look at how to get salespeople started and help them be successful in the field. This is Sales Untraining, a very different kind of sales podcast. 3 out of 4 salespeople are failing. They're falling short of their revenue. Why doesn't sales training work? That's what this sales podcast is about. It's your weekly sales strategy guide designed to rewire your sales brain. Hey, welcome to Sales Untraining. So good to have you alongside, and want to ask you to take a moment and like and subscribe to the podcast. It's your weekly sales strategy guide designed to completely rewire your sales brain. I'm very excited to welcome in someone I've known for quite some time, worked with their company in the past. Multivac is the name of the company. Brandon White is the Vice President of Sales and Marketing. And we're going to talk all things sales training about a very large organization from a guy who's experienced it at just about every level. Brandon, really good to have you on board, man.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
You know, your experience is really cool because you've been with the company 22 years and you're at the pinnacle of leading the sales organization now. But you started 22 years ago, a little over, as a sales administrator. This has been quite a journey for you. And so it gives you a unique perspective along the way of the difficulties of being trained and then conversely training salespeople. As a new sales guy coming into Multivac and getting trained by whatever was going on at that time, 15 or 20 years ago, what was that like? What was the biggest challenge that you faced as a salesperson as you began to add to your abilities to be successful?
Starting it as a sales administrator gave me an opportunity to understand the foundational knowledge of the company, the ins and outs of processes, the people, the departments. We're a very large organization where we have manufacturing across many parts of our business that are not here in the United States, they're elsewhere in the world. So taking a chance and going through the sales administration department, which I was very keen on wanting to get into sales very early on, but that foundational knowledge over those first couple of years of working on quotations, order processing, working with customers alongside our true salespersons at that time was very instrumental to that early development in my career, because at that point in time, I had not had a professional career. I was fresh out of college, a very competitive athlete, through high school and college. And so I really wanted to get into that sales element, but it kind of gave me an opportunity to take a step back and really understand the business before I take a leap of faith into outside sales.
A lot of companies, Brandon, they don't want to do that because of the investment. They think, well, if we hire a salesperson, we got to start to get production right away. But this path that you took, because there's so much to learn, and I know how much you guys have to learn at Multivac in particular with regards to products and markets and applications and all those things, but just simply learning all the ins and outs of your own company's systems and processes. That's a tremendous amount for any new salesman to learn, isn't it?
It is. And it's critical that you understand the foundational knowledge. I think where a lot of organizations go wrong is they kind of expect salespeople to come in and be the expert on day one.
Right.
You really have to have a talent development program for that individual, whether they're green or whether they might be a tenured 25, 30-year sales professional that's been in other companies. They are owed that opportunity to give them that base foundational knowledge. And then, past that foundational knowledge, if you really need to get into the specifics, that's where the rest of the company can come in and really partner with that salesperson and really bring in this, baseline plus this top line. And you really kind of set yourself apart as a company.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I think based on my experience with you guys, of course, every company will always say we can get better and we can do things better. But I think that's one of the things that you guys do pretty well is you get people to a certain level and you know you've got that whole technical expertise back end to help. And you guys actually get guys up and running fairly quickly based on the amount of things that they need to learn. Is that a fair observation?
It's a fair observation. We take a lot of pride and put a lot of time into that talent development very early on. Sometimes we have some expectations. You need to kind of hit the floor running too as well, especially if you're talking about somebody that has industry experience, or we've had a few cases where maybe somebody has been with Multivac, decided to maybe go different direction for a number of years and actually then come back in. Those individuals can acclimate very, very well to our company. And so that early on development, you may not necessarily need it. Maybe you touch on a few points, but then you're really kind of bringing them up to speed on who the organization is today.
I want to ask you this because I think this is an eye opener for a lot of sales leaders. Having asked this question over the last 20 years and doing what I do to a variety of organizations, it's amazing the discussion that comes out of this, Brandon. But you've started at sales administrator, worked through sales, been through sales leadership, now VP sales and marketing. If you took an experienced salesperson, in other words, they've got selling skills, they have some understanding of how sales works, they've got some background success, and you bring them into Multivac, they're not in your industry. Based on your experience, how long does it take them to get to that first milestone where they can actually go out and make calls and be able to do a pretty good job with it?
I would say if somebody comes in with experience, and there's a strong relationship individual, probably somewhere between 3 and 6 months, they're actually out in their territory working, their territory with those accounts. Those type of sales reps know how to kind of open the door. We as a company can open many doors, very successful in supplying equipment for a number of years here in our market. But you kind of couple those two together, 3 to 6 months, they're out in the territory. They're truly working alongside their customers. We're probably going to partner somebody with them, a mentor, another sales rep who has some tenure that can bring some experience into that conversation. Their sales leader, which we have many regional sales leaders, take that opportunity to work alongside that sales rep because you kind of want to guide the conversation, but really truly those coachable moments or that windshield time or that prep work before or after those meetings that kind of bring that baseline knowledge that the sales rep knows about the company, how they were able to get the meeting initiated, and then obviously the result of that. And then how do we kind of keep building these small little steps so they see this incremental growth over and over again. And then next thing you know, probably a year, they really are dangerous on how they can really use information within our company and be quite successful.
Yeah, that's pretty consistent with what I hear is that, listen, we feel like we can get somebody to the point where they can make a call and have a reasonable conversation. They're not going to be technically adept. They're not going to be able to really drive the whole sales process like we'd like to see them do eventually. But 3 months, we should be able to get them there. They understand our systems and processes. They're starting to get a glimpse of what the market looks like, things of that nature. It's interesting, though, a lot of companies, in my experience, they're like, we bring them in for a week of training. We put them out in the field, give them an account list and say, hey, go sell. Right? I mean, that makes no sense whatsoever. But I like your vision on that is that, hey, by the time we get to a year, we begin to think of them as getting close to that point where we can begin to call them experts at some level, right? That they have some competency on the technical side and so forth. It really plays into the calculus of hiring new salespeople when there's a pretty good ramp up period in getting people up to date. How do you guys typically approach that, knowing that a new territory is going to have that, that flat no growth or perhaps that lull before we begin to create any real sales opportunities?
So we have a number of tools that we'll go through with that individual, whether they're online classes. We have a lot of online class platforms within our company. We have a lot of in-person trainings that are scheduled throughout the year. As you kind of go through that first year, there is that time, a little bit of that lag or lull, as you referenced, that, you're spending time developing this employee. Now, it's very important because salespeople they're coin operated. They want to be out working with their clients. They want to be out in their territories. They probably don't always want to sit in in a meeting to understand about the equipment services, and
Right.
you need them to have that drive where they're kind of pushing the company like, I'm learning, I want to get out there, I'm going to use this information to the best of my ability. But what I find is during this time, this first year, if you hire the sales rep, they have strong relationship skills, they can still be calling on clients during this time. And I think sales leaders sometimes underestimate salespeople because that strong relationship aspect, the quality of that salesperson can overcome some of these, maybe
No doubt.
items that might pop up, where
Right.
we got somebody in a class trying to learn something, but, they take a break away from that. They make a phone call, they address the customer's concerns, they build some rapport with that customer. So you are kind of incrementally working on that too, during that period of time. But it really is critical that they have strong customer relationship skills, and they often tout it during the interview process, and you got to leverage it.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question. It comes up all the time now because now with the age of digital and email and outbound and all the things that we can do to contact clients, it seems like more and more clients that I work with, they're concerned because everybody's trying to do everything by email. I can't get people to pick up the phone. I can't get people to make in-person calls. Talk a little bit about that from your perspective, how important it is for your people to be on the phone or be face-to-face, and how much do you encourage that?
It's extremely important to be face-to-face. I mean, people want to buy from people that they like. And if you're sitting behind Teams or you're sitting over a telephone, those are definitely communication means. You have to leverage those. The technology is available. We saw in COVID early on, it was not great technology, but by the time we got done with it, everybody got very accustomed to it. But
sure,
it's so important for your sales professional to be in your customers' facilities. They need to be having those face-to-face conversations. They need to be taking that opportunity to go entertain those clients, because that's where you really build deep-rooted relationships. Where correspondence is over email, that is certainly a means to communicate,
right.
But it is not the means of building a relationship.
It's just communication. That's just all, right? Yeah. Well, I think it's important because I've known you long enough to know that when you say relationship, you're not saying, hey, people buy things because they like our rep. They buy them because they like them first. They give them the opportunity to be in the room and to have access to the opportunity. But they're buying that incredible expertise that I know that you guys develop inside of each of those reps. And I want to talk a little bit about how you guys do that. How important is the sales leader in the success of each individual salesperson? That sounds like a leading question. I know it does, but because I know you have the perspective of having been the sales guy, the sales manager, sales leader, and now the VP of sales. How important is that role in your organization?
Oh, a sales leader is very critical to any role, any company. You have to have strong leaders. If you don't have a strong leader, you're not building out strong teams. A strong leader understands what their team needs. And they take a step back, they reflect, they're probably thinking about this employee, what's the baseline knowledge we need them to have? What do they come in with? What do they have presently that maybe exceeds that, or maybe you don't necessarily need to hit that training so hard on that particular topics. And so you can kind of work on the valleys. The valleys is what, honestly, I think sales leaders need to spend their time on, because if you're able to kind of build those up so you don't have so many highs and lows, that really is very critical to the overall success for that sales team. It's very important for us. Talent development, we ask our leaders to have one-on-one meetings with their salespeople every week. Now, again, that's not just the day-to-day transactions. Those happen all day, every day, but we're talking about quality time to peel that salesperson away each and every single week to talk about, what are things are working well, what things are not working well.
Sure.
Where do you need some development? Where do you think the organization could be partnering with you or your client more closely? And those are very intentional steps that I think quality organizations take with their people, because it's impactful not only for the individuals that are in those meetings, but it's very impactful, I think, ultimately to our customer.
Yeah, that's great stuff. He's Brandon White, VP Sales and Marketing at Multivac. Coming up next, I'm going to talk to him about some specific things that they do at Multivac in terms of training people, developing people, and I also want to take a look at how they choose their sales leaders. Stay with me. Hey, thanks for making Sales Untraining your first listen of the week. And if you find something you like, if you hear something that's interesting, I hope you'll share it with somebody you know. You can find out more about me at bizlockerroom.com or email me, kelly@bizlockerroom.com. Now back to the show. One of the things that we tell sales leaders is there's two very clear indicators when you've got a sick salesperson, if you will. Number one, when they ask questions, it's not actually asking questions that lead to dialogue or conversation. It's more like an interrogation. You know, do you use XYZ? Where did you buy it? Who did you buy it from? Did you buy the warranty? When does it expire? You know, it feels like you're sitting in a police station and they've got the light in your eyes and you're being interrogated, right? That's number one. Number two, if the minute they get wind of the fact that there's a need, they immediately jump into pushing a product. That's amateur hour. That's amateur mistake number one. Welcome back, Sales Untraining. I'm Kelly Riggs. Really great to have you alongside. And I ask you before we started today, let me ask you again, not just to like and subscribe the podcast, but if you like what you hear, share it with someone who needs to be in the conversation. What in the world is wrong with Sales Untraining? And the answer is, unfortunately, just about everything, because we ask too much and provide too little, and the methodologies that we use are flawed in a number of ways. But I love talking to people in the field who are doing this, especially someone like Brandon, who's my guest today, who started off as a sales administrator and worked his way all the way up through the career ladder, 22 years now, VP of Sales and Marketing. Brandon, we left off talking about sales leadership, and I know you and I could go a while on this particular topic. But it's hard to find good sales leaders. You know, the typical methodology is take your top sales guy and ask him or her to be a sales leader. That doesn't work out very often, and as we've detailed on this podcast quite a bit. But let me ask you, now that you're in the vice president of sales and you've been where you've been, what things stick out for you? What are you looking for when you evaluate someone to step into a sales leadership role? What's really important?
Well, I would say, I'm looking for a sales leader who has a plan. Typically when you're going through an interview process, they kind of come in ad hoc, that's probably not going to be a strong leader for you. If they come in with a clear plan, who have taken the time to understand your organization, come in with very pointed questions that I think generate conversation, that are deep conversation and not just surface level. I think that usually kind of gives you an indicator that this person, clearly has a plan, has done the homework, and really is interested in your business.
I love that, because what you're saying is, look, I'm looking for somebody who is not going to be selling anymore. They're going to be leading a team of salespeople. And so I want to have some sort of strategy and development process for creating a team. Some people are better at it than others in terms of, being that sales leader. What are some of the characteristics you think set the real high-performing sales leaders apart?
Well, I think a lot of it starts with asking pointed questions where you can really get to the root cause of a problem. Not be afraid of the hard tasks that come along with being a sales leader. It's easy to fly high when sales are high and you got all the wins and those are the fun times. That's a great aspect of being a sales leader, because you get to enjoy those moments with your team members. But really taking an opportunity to be direct, having the ability to have hard conversations with people, and being able to assess, because I think when you watch a sales leader, it's really not necessarily about them. It shouldn't be. It should be about the team. And I think there's been many great teams out there, whether the sports, military, great leaders really focus. It's all about the team. It's not about them. And so the accolade really is, or the opportunity for improvement is really about the team, not necessarily about that individual.
You bet. You mentioned, when you got the wind in your sails, it's kind of easy, actually, right? When you think about it, as long as we're hitting our number, everybody's happy. And you guys had a period of time through COVID where, just because of the way it worked, it really worked well for your company, and you guys had some nice wind in your sails. But come 23, things started to kind of settle back and settle into normal, and it was back to the grind, and trying to find market share and all those kinds of things. Sales leadership really takes on a critical role when the wind is not in your sails, right? It becomes a lot of mindset issues and those kinds of things. Let's go back to your days as a sales leader. How did you interact with your guys when they're struggling? What did you try to do that made a difference to them?
I think first you have to truly understand what's going on. You have to not necessarily speak to them. You have to ask questions and really take an opportunity to listen. And that can be very difficult for anybody. I mean, we are human. We like to speak and talk and to kind of get our voice across to the other person. But more importantly, is taking a step back. Is this individual coming out of COVID, where we did a lot of things virtually, and now struggling to try to get back into that rhythm where they're in person with right. clients? We saw that. I think many companies saw that. And, are they using that as a crutch, or is it, a challenge maybe where they're trying to balance the home life, where home life was at home more often during COVID, and
no doubt.
Others, trying to transition out of that. And now you're have some competing interests where you're getting a lot more questions at home than you are on the business side. So you got to be very mindful of that, because you got to sometimes have some coachable moments, through those. Or I would just say that, take an opportunity to understand, is it pipeline? If it's pipeline, how as a company can we partner with that individual? Because in our company, we have a lot of application specialists who are subject matter experts in their field, whether it's our processing technology, automations, you name it. How can that person help partner with the field sales to get that individual to kind of get that gear moving, get that tire moving, because that's very important to kind of get that mojo back and going with that individual.
Yeah, as I listen to you say all of those things and talk about all those things, we ask so much of salespeople. I tell salespeople all the time, listen, what you do is hard. It's not for the faint of heart. It requires an incredibly strong mindset, and you've got to be a learner and willing to grow and develop. And one of the more interesting conversations I have with business owners or sales leaders many times is to give them an awareness of how much you're actually asking salespeople to know and learn and do in order to be successful. So it puts such an enormous strain and enormous importance, Brandon, on the sales training process. I know you guys have got a lengthy process for training salespeople and all that, but what are one or two of the real key pieces of that training that you found to be absolutely critical to sales success?
Well, I think a couple of things. One is that foundational knowledge is critical. And you think about what a new employee or even a current employee that has tenure in a company, you have to monitor how much information you're providing to them, and really see what that engagement level is with that information, with that employee. And sometimes you have to take a step back and allow it to sink in. And there's been times where we've had to go back and retrain on that topic and not be afraid of that. That should not be looked at from a leader to an employee as a bad thing. There are times when retention needs to be a retraining. And that's okay. Now, again, if you're now talking about more systemic problems that go out some period of time, that's a whole different conversation.
Sure.
But I do believe as a leader, you have to take an opportunity to take a step back and say, okay, we have provided this training. We see some retention in this area of that training, but we might need to go back and hit some touch points on some other aspects of that, because the old adage that, you kind of put a fire hose into a salesperson's mouth and you feed them full of information. There's a lot of those salespeople out there that feel that way, and they shouldn't. They really shouldn't. We owe it to them to give it almost like a drip campaign.
Yes, that's fantastic stuff. Man, it's really great to get your perspective, Brandon, especially a guy who's been from the very, bottom piece of the selling process and starting and now serving at the very pinnacle of your organization. Appreciate your time. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Hey, it's Sales on Training. I'm Kelly Riggs. We'll see you next time.
Sales on Training is a production of Business Locker Room and Pod About It Productions. Music and editing by Doug Branson. To get more Kelly, visit bizlockerroom.com.